Patrick in Germany, thanks for waiting.
Oh my goodness. Can you hear me?
You're on the air.
Okay. I'm still a bit gobsmacked because I've listened to you guys for so long. It's kind of weird actually talking to you over the phone. Okay, I'm calling, I'm a little bit late topic-wise, but I'm calling in regards to something that Tracie was talking about a few times ago that she was on about being in a state of sleep paralysis and thinking that she heard a lawnmower,
Yes.
but not being able to actually say whether or not that was a lawnmower because the senses aren't always trustworthy.
Or a two-stroke engine of some kind. I don't know.
Sorry?
But yeah, it was like just, I heard a two-stroke engine, I thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I hope it's an accurate enough summary.
Sure.
I'm getting something coming through. I hope my connection's all right. But yeah, it was to do with people giving personal anecdotes about things they've heard, but sometimes when they've been asleep, sometimes not. But these personal experiences we keep hearing from people about, this is what I heard, it's proof to me or whatever. And I was listening to this, and I was sort of wriggling in my chair a bit because I was so excited. I had a story with a similar moral to it, if you will, except that it wasn't a lawnmower that I heard. It was actually someone breathing in my room.
Yeah, spooky, huh?
Yeah, look, I'm really sorry. I can't actually see you guys while I'm talking, so that might be a bit confusing. I'm sorry, because my connection's not fantastic. But yeah, and I was actually completely awake. I was in bed, but I had gotten up and I had turned on the light. I was looking around my room trying to get some information about where this is coming from. I'd gone outside into my balcony, the hallway, downstairs, but I sort of just had to go back to bed, not being able to figure out what exactly this was, but having a skeptical conscience. And,
Or if it was anything.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you rule out auditory hallucination when you're on your own?
Yeah, and I guess the question I would have is, when you left the bedroom, did you still hear it?
No, I didn't hear it when I left my bedroom, but I did hear it when I went back in. It was faint enough to not be heard if I had the TV running or something. But in the absence of other noise, it was so distinguishable.
Okay.
So I basically just had to lie there and dissatisfied, just knowing that whatever it was, I could not say that this is actually, a ghost in my room or something, and there was no way that I was going to go to any of my housemates the next day and say that this is actually something that happened, despite that being exactly what I had heard.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes things just sound like other things. I remember an incident where at a place I used to work where there was this creaky door sound in the women's room, even when you were the only one in there and there were no doors moving. And it was so bizarre, and I heard somebody talking a little bit later about it, and someone called it the haunted bathroom. And I started laughing, and I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, you can hear the creaky door. And I was like, yeah, that is so funny. What is that? And they were like, I don't know. Well, finally someone figured it out. I figured it out at one point, but when I brought it to the other women, they were like, oh yeah, we already figured it out too. There was an air freshener in there that was way up near the ceiling, and every time that thing would go off, I don't know if it was timed or how it was set, but every time it went off, it made the creaky door noise. Sounded just like a haunted house creaky door sound, but it was an air freshener.
Exactly. What got me about this was, it sounded so real, and just knowing that if I had been a person that actually already believed in ghosts, how easily that could be a confirmation to me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it also depends on what you know. There's a bunch of things that if you aren't aware of them, you don't have the option to consider them as options. On more than one occasion, I've thought I heard, like a whistling breathing, and I had to stop and say, okay, is that me? Let me see if I can consciously time my breathing to what I heard to see if that was me, or let me break time. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's some other noise. But there's also that one of my favorite bands, which I think is now defunct, is Venus Hum, and they were named after a condition where you have this constant swishing, throbbing noise, essentially, that you're hearing because of the way the blood goes through your ear and stuff like that. And if you didn't know anything about it, it'd definitely sound weird.
Exactly. Or if you came from a sexual society that was more superstitious, or if someone had cursed you and told you you were going to be haunted that night.
Yeah, but this is something you would hear. This is something you would hear and nobody else would be able to hear, and yet it's real, and you don't necessarily have an easy way to demonstrate it. So
exactly, and it gobsmacked me because of how many times I dismissed it with this argument of, well, I heard it and you can't tell me what I heard, like it was me, I was there, and so on and so forth. But like, I really hope someone might listen to this who might be thinking that, you know, I'm just so dogmatically skeptical that, you know, it could have been a ghost, but I wouldn't have believed it, because I actually did find out what it was eventually, and it was so banal. It got a bit louder, and I got up again and checked my balcony again, and swung my head around. It was a terrace house, and I swung my head around. It turned out it was my next door neighbor snoring really loudly. And just the way it came to the wall was just, to my brain, indistinguishable from having someone actually breathing in my room.
There you go.
But even if his wife just had given him a nudge and he had shut up or rolled over, I just would have been left in that state of not knowing what it was, but not being able to actually justifiably say that, just because I heard someone breathing in my room means that there was someone breathing in my room.
And this is why I really hate when people demand a debunking of something like that, because you can't go back and find out what it is. You can make some guesses, you can, give it your best shot, but you really can't always say this is what was going on. Sometimes that input is no longer there and there's no way to know what it was. But ultimately, what I wish people would understand is that they're leaning on the argument from ignorance. So if somebody says to me, it's a ghost unless you can prove otherwise, unless you can debunk my ghost theory, it's like, you don't get to, it doesn't just become a ghost because you can't explain it.
Exactly, and there's another example say to you, well, they think they're being more
reasonable,
inclined if they say something like, oh, I know it's not proof for you, but it's proof for me. It's like, I don't know what the fuck you're on about.
No, it's not proof at all. Yeah.
How did you accept that as proof?
Yeah, the fact you can't explain something doesn't make it proof of anything.
Exactly.
Anyway, thanks a lot for the call, Patrick. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Care. Yeah, so sometimes I have problems sleeping, and it gets to the point where I need it really quiet. And I remember going to bed one night, and I lay down and put my head on the pillow, and I hear, and I'm like, holy crap, one of the neighbors is jamming.
Got their bass, yeah.
I sit up, and it goes away. Like I can't hear it. And I lay back down, and I hear it again. And I'm like, oh, I know it's coming out. Maybe the wall and the pillow is probably amplifying it a little bit. So I leave the house.
Air conditioning. Yeah, go ahead.
I leave the house and I walk all over the neighborhood, and I cannot find where this music's coming from. But it was clearly music and not a water heater. And so it turns out the bedroom is directly over the garage, and it was coming from, I don't know, a neighbor's way down the street. You couldn't even hear it when you were out on the street. It had to follow this really strange path, and then my garage became an amplifier which fed up to the wall where my pillow was, and that was the only way you were going to hear it. So I couldn't even go to my neighbors and be like, turn it down, it's too loud, because it really wasn't. It was just, I've got a garage amplifier.
It's the weird architecture. It was built that way on purpose by a loony architect who...
They planned it just to annoy me when it was time for sleep.
Yeah, this is creepy. It needs to be a film on Netflix. Yeah.